further ado, so we can start, I would like to introduce the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Ms. Dunya Mijatović, who you have now had the pleasure of hearing for the 7th time. So I will not go into biographical details because also there was an extensive introduction to her at the beginning of this Human Dimension implementation meeting. So thank you very much, and I would give the floor to Ms. Dunya Mijatović.
Thank you, Frane. Good morning, Excellencies, dear journalists, representatives of civil society, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to once again open the session on media freedom and free expression in the OSCE, update you on the situation across the region, and present to you the main priorities of my office. I would like to extend a special warm welcome to all the journalists present here today, as well as the members of the civil society, and thank you in advance for your contributions to today's discussion, not to mention to your courageous work in the OSCE region. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the German OSCE chairmanship, then also my dear colleague, Director Link, and his dedicated staff in ODIHR for organizing this important gathering in such a wonderful manner. I especially welcome the innovative format of the opening plenary, which I had the privilege to participate in. I think it brought a bit different angle and offered a possibility for more open discussion about the challenges of our time when we talk about human rights. Now let me turn to the topic of this morning, the state of media freedom and free expression in the OSCE region. I will, of course, as always, start with safety of journalists. As in prior years, safety of journalists is the key issue to address today. In order to grasp the gravity of the situation that we are about to tackle in the next 3 hours, we just have to look at the numbers and the names of those harmed, in some cases even killed, for their journalistic work. Just like in previous years, journalists continue to lose their lives for doing their job, informing public on issues that affect us all. How many, you may ask? Does the number really matter to any of us? Even one case is one too many. Perhaps it took the events of January 7th of last year in Paris, when 8 journalists of Charlie Hebdo magazine were killed over cartoons, to wake us up to the bigger picture that there is a full-scale, all-out assault being waged against media and free expression. We cannot look at the safety issue as a set of numbers of dead and injured in the OSCE region. It would be unfair and it would be inappropriate. Violence against journalists includes much more than that. It includes the use of anti-terrorism laws, criminal libel defamation laws, mass surveillance to silence critics of the powerful. And when I say powerful, I do not mean only the governments. I'm thinking about oligarchs, criminals, and all others in our societies that are trying to suppress and stop critical voices. In the past years, I have argued that the situation can only be reversed if the participating states demonstrate the political will to stop their countries from turning into battlegrounds where freedom of expression is attacked. The sad reality is, however, that the genuine recognition in far too many OSCE participating states is missing, that there is a denial of problems and no will to remedy the situation. While numbers are only part of the story when it comes to illustrating the scale of the ongoing assault on free media and free expression, they do tell a story. Since I last spoke to you in September 2015, My office has documented more than 50 physical attacks on media workers, including deaths of journalists. Most of those attacks and murders go unpunished. Attackers and masterminds remain free, and I'm constantly calling on the authorities to investigate and prosecute the ones that are affecting our society with this practice tremendously. In 2 weeks, we will mark the 10th anniversary of the killing of Anna Politkovskaya. Her death is a gruesome reminder, not only in the Russian Federation, but the entire OSCE region and beyond, that impunity for crimes committed against journalists must be eradicated. We all remember the murders of Georgi Gongadze, Hrant Dink, Slavko Čoruvija, Elmar Husseinov, Duško Jovanović, and many, many others. In none of these killings has justice been fully served. In none of these killings, justice has been fully served. And this is the reality of our region. And we still dare to call the OSCE a family of democracies. Just as our human rights apply online as well as offline, the same is true when we speak about safety. As you may recall from last year, I have been alarmed by the rapidly growing number of reports from across the OSCE region about how female journalists and bloggers are singled out and fiercely attacked in social media via tweets, Facebook posts, and in comments to online articles and blogs. The issue has become and will definitely remain in the focus of the work of my office, as we urgently need to raise more awareness to the serious problems caused by online threats on female journalists and bloggers and their possible spread into the realm of physical violence. Furthermore, the phenomenon has a devastating and wide-ranging impact on freedom of the media at large, and more journalists and bloggers are likely to engage in self-censorship. Threats and fear of being verbally or physically abused may have a significant impact on what and how news stories are reported. It is psychological violence that creeps in quietly and may result in trauma. As a result, journalists may choose to opt or stop writing critically online on issues of importance. And this is, I hope, not what we want to have in our region. This year, just like in previous years, we have also seen alternative methods to restrict and to punish alternative voices and independent media across the OSCE region. To give you just an example, I have repeatedly warned the OSCE participating states about the effect of laws countering extremism and terrorism on free expression and free media. I said that anti-extremism and anti-terrorism laws could be particularly dangerous for free media when they fail to clearly define the notion of extremism and terrorism. And they are likewise problematic when they fail to properly define the criteria and safeguards which are necessary to guarantee the fair interpretation and enforcement. I'm never saying that those threats are not dangerous and that they are tremendously affecting our society, and the governments should definitely fight those evil groups and everything that is affecting our society and safety of all of us, but not at the expense of human rights and free speech. We cannot live in any society to have this kind of safety without respect of human rights. And vice versa. How can you enjoy human rights if you do not live in safe and secure society? The situation has not improved. Our own, very own security has become one of the biggest threats to freedom of expression. And this is not just the OSCE region, it's a global trend. Although the aim of my remarks here today is not to get into too many country-specific concerns in the OSCE region, allow me to nonetheless make a few short remarks about several countries that need to be highlighted. It is very clear to all of you, governments, civil society members, that there is almost not a week that I do not have an intervention in one of the OSCE participating states related to the issue of safety, laws, sometimes praising moves by the countries, but that is very rare, unfortunately. Following the recent coup attempt in Turkey and a series of terrorist attacks, it is understandable that the authorities need to revise and to strengthen security arrangements. As I have remarked on many occasions and stated in my public statement the day after the coup attempt, I condemn in the strongest terms any attempt to change the democratic order of Turkey through the use of force. Democratically elected governments must be safeguarded, but they in turn must protect media freedom and support the role of journalists playing in ensuring, in strengthening democracies. What we have seen in several weeks is pressure exercised by the authorities on critical journalists and media outlets in Turkey. My office currently estimates that there are currently 120 imprisoned journalists, about 100 media outlets closed, and 140,000 websites blocked. Once again, I call on Turkey to engage constructively and implement its OSCE commitments on media freedom and freedom of expression. Of course, Turkey is not the only country where OSCE commitments to free media and free expression are under severe strain. Independent media remain continuously targeted in the Russian Federation, using different methods. Journalist safety remains at an all-time low. As mentioned earlier, impunity for crimes against journalists prevails, and laws infringing free expression and free media have been introduced and are enforced. More than 30 murders of journalists are still not fully or not at all investigated. Instead of ensuring protection and independence of members of the media, the authorities are effectively limiting the space for public debate and the citizens' right to freedom of expression. I welcome this year's release of Hadija Ismailova. This was a very positive step, as was the presidential pardon of a number of imprisoned journalists and freedom of expression advocates, including Rasul Jafarov. Unfortunately, Ismailova's sentence has only been suspended, which means she is not able to travel and be here with us. I call on the authorities once again to drop all the charges against her and release the remaining imprisoned journalists in Azerbaijan. As the crisis in and around Ukraine continues, there are a host of media freedom issues. Only 2 months ago, Pavel Sheremet, a journalist with Radio Vesti and Ukrainska Pravda, was killed by a car bomb. That brings to 10 the number of journalists killed in Ukraine since the conflict began in early 2014. Additionally, impunity of violence against journalists remains highly problematic. This summer, personal information of more than 4,000 representatives of various Ukrainian and international media outlets was published on a website, resulting in a number of them receiving death threats. 2 of the journalists that received death threats and their data was imposed on this website called Mijatović, I met yesterday at a side event. In Armenia, journalists increasingly require protection while reporting on civil unrest. This summer, I sought reassurances from the authorities once again that journalists' rights and safety would be protected and urged that the government should implement practical steps to ensure restraint on the part of law enforcement towards members of the media. My office has documented increasing number of death threats, intimidation, and harassment of journalists in Southeast Europe. Just in the last few weeks, I had a statement warning my own country, Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also Serbia, where journalists were intimidated and received death threats. There are also murders from the past that are not yet resolved in Serbia and in Montenegro. In the whole region, public broadcasting reform is stalled in all the countries of the region, keeping the media outlets under political control. Let us not forget about media freedom concerns in EU member states. The severe weakening of media pluralism in Hungary that started a few years ago, in 2010 to be precise, worrisome developments affecting the independence of public service media in our host country Poland, or negative legislative trends in several Western European states that have adopted or are in the process of adopting security-driven legislation that can infringe on freedom of expression, all indicate that freedom of expression is challenged in this political bloc that has democracy and human rights as one of its founding values and should be leading by example. Only last week, in the United States, police issued an arrest warrant against a journalist who was reporting on issue of clear public interest. The situation for free media continues to be challenging, also in other parts of the OSCE region. In many of the participating states in Central Asia, there is hardly any or no progress for media freedom. The fact that there are very few interventions from my office is not a sign that things are getting better at all. Quite the contrary. In many countries, there is a stagnation, and in others, we are seeing a slow decline for free media and the work of journalists. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, one of our first commitments in our founding document, called Helsinki Final Act, is that the countries should promote, and once again let me quote, a climate of confidence and respect among peoples consonant with their duty to refrain from propaganda for wars of aggression. Today, counter-propaganda, information wars, and hybrid wars are the terms that have become part of our daily discourse. Stories of conspiracy theories, tortured children, mass graves, and mail parcels with heads of insurgents fill television screens and social media feeds. Some of this material might be illegal under international and national laws, other might be unethical, disturbing, or simply unorthodox and dissenting. While dealing with media content is not at the core of my mandate, let me underline the reasons why this issue is of concern. Propaganda destroys the profession of journalism. And of course, most of you know where I come from. I come from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina. The effect of propaganda that my region experienced and the effect that we still are going through, the poison that propaganda created, the hatred, division among people, is still even visible in people's behavior. But the deepest scars are the scars in our souls and living in a society that experienced this kind of trauma. And I thought, and many thought, that we learned on our mistakes and that we are moving forward in a 21st century. But unfortunately, everything that happened in and around Ukraine showed us that we cannot call ourselves mature societies and societies that are learning on mistakes. Propaganda destroys the profession of journalism. Journalists are forced or bribed to be a mere conduit of the messages. It becomes an instrument to establish authoritarian regimes, thus distorting basic foundations of democracy. It affects the public trust in the media. Threat of propaganda becomes an excuse for governments to restrict or even ban all hostile messages, actual and potential, coming from abroad. Propaganda for war and hatred strikes at the very foundation of the OSCE principle of comprehensive security. The use of propaganda in times of conflict has the effect of nothing less than throwing a gasoline on an open flame. Propaganda fuels and contributes to an escalation of conflict. It prevents desired disarmaments, security, and cooperation. And this is why we have institutions in human dimension, to remind you about all these wonderful words on paper that you put in a Helsinki Final Act and many other documents that you adopted by consensus, but you do not honor those commitments. Since the onset of the Ukraine conflict in 2014, my office tried, with the limited mandate, to help. And we have spent considerable time and resources on working with Russian and Ukrainian journalists in confidence-building measures. Senior representatives from Russian and Ukrainian journalist associations regularly come to Vienna to discuss ways to improve professional standards and the safety of journalists. These meetings have led to a greater understanding, confidence-building, cooperation between journalists from the two countries. And they themselves have entitled the cooperation "Two Countries, One Profession." I'm very proud of all people that are part of this project. They are courageous, professional, and they want a better future for journalism, but also for their countries. Finally, allow me to address some internal issues, notably the importance of the work by the OSCE institutions. I use this opportunity with such a distinguished audience to repeat what I briefly mentioned on Monday. The defense and advancement of human rights in the OSCE participating states is strengthened by all our institutions. And I'm here not talking only about the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media. I dare to talk about all three institutions. The OSCE is known for its institutions, not in spite of them. It is a time for all of you to come to the defense of the institutions for the sake of human rights, and if you do care about human rights. I therefore use this opportunity to call on all of you to protect and preserve the independence and the mandates of the institutions that you, in a highly commendable and self-critical move, established around some decades ago. It has come to that time when I ask the question that I ask each year in this forum. Is media freedom stronger than a year ago? Are journalists working under safer conditions than before? I'm sure it comes as no surprise to any of you that after all the issues I just mentioned, the answer remains as in previous years, a loud and clear no. Now that you have heard my assessment, in the coming minutes we will get to hear what the authorities, distinguished representatives of the governments of the participating states of the OSCE will say about the status of free media and free expression in our region. So before I close, I would like to ask the distinguished authorities sitting here at a table to use this opportunity and in presence of so many outstanding and brave members of the civil society, take an honest look at their own record and stop denying that there are problems. For almost 7 years, I'm hearing that there is no problem and everything is fine. And I do not understand issues in certain countries. But as always before, I strongly disagree with this notion. I do listen, I respect each and every statement. I try to look at the broader picture, But for me, there is no much explanation if we see situations like I just mentioned to you. Murders, beatings, harassments, intimidations, impunity, bad laws. I think we all understand what is going on. It is only through honest and direct discussions that we together can improve the essential right to free expression and free media. I very much look forward to your statements. Thank you very much.